Hello everyone, I'm Mila from TAUKO Magazine, and this is the CREST video tutorial. The design is by Birgitta Helmersson, and it is being published in the TAUKO Magazine Issue No19 and as a single PDF pattern. I will be making the dress version of this zero-waste design. You should start creating the fabric pieces by folding the fabric lengthwise in half and then check from the instructions the length of the fabric of the size you are making. For example, I'm making size 3, so I'm cutting the fabric length to 104 centimeters. I'm gonna use the whole width of the fabric for this CREST project, which means that I'm cutting the pattern along this indicated cutting line, and then I'll place the fabric edge on marked facing fold on the fabric fold, and then I'll position the remaining pattern piece along the self edge. I'll join the two sections by drawing a continuous line with tailor's chalk, creating a complete pattern outline. I'll find the notch marking on the pattern and make a corresponding mark on the opposite side of the fabric. I'm continuing by finding the measure of the waist length, which is also indicated in the instructions. This is 71 centimeters for size 3, and then I'm gonna measure it from the bottom edge of the fabric along the fold line and mark this point. Then I'm gonna mark the half width of my fabric, and from the waist length marking I'm drawing a perpendicular line to the half width mark. Now I'm ready to cut the bodice pattern piece. And then I can remove the paper pattern and place the back hem facing template on the folded upper edge of the fabric. And then I can cut along the facing template. These are now my back hem facing piece and my front piece. I'm gonna mark and add a notch to the center point of the back hem facing piece, and then I'm gonna also mark the center front with notches and add notches 2.5 centimeters from each sleeve hem. Now I'm taking the remaining fabric piece. This will be the back with the front hem piece, and I'm cutting the underarm seam following the line I created before, and then I'm gonna cut the sleeve hem open, and I'm gonna mark notches 2.5 centimeters from each sleeve hem. I'm gonna also make a notch to the notch marking on the neckline, and then finally I'm gonna mark and make a notch 20 centimeters down from the center back neckline. This is indicating the back neck slit opening. Now prepare the roller tie pieces. So you should have 4 of them, and fold the raw edges towards the center, and this will enclose the raw edges inside. The right side of the fabric should be now outside. You can add a few pins to have the folded edges together along the long side. Then top stitch close to the edge along the length. I'm usually doing this, the folding, while I sew, and that's completely possible and a nice way to do these narrow straps for your project. Alright, so now it's time to start assembling the dress. So these are the back with the front hem pieces, and I'm aligning the right sides of the fabric together, aligning the center back edges, adding a few pins and sewing with 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, starting at the back slit marking and continuing then down to the hem. After stitching, pressing the seam allowance open, and as I cut my pieces from a self edge, I'm gonna leave it like this, but if you have raw edges there, you should fold and press the edges towards the seam to conceal them. Then I'm gonna edge stitch the edges of the fabric on each side of the slit and continue stitching down to the hem. To reinforce the base of the slit, I'm sewing a sort of row horizontal stitches across the bottom of the opening, stitching back and forth a few times to strengthen this area. So this here is my front piece with the wrong side up, and I'm then gonna take my neck bias piece and place it on the neckline of the bodice with the right side of the bias against the wrong side of the bodice, and add a few pins and sew it with approximately 0.8 centimeter seam allowance, stretching the binding slightly as I'm sewing. After that, I'm folding and pressing the raw edges of the bias by 0.8 centimeters, wrong sides together. At the same time, then I will press the binding away from the neckline and the neckline seam allowance towards the binding. I'm turning the binding to the right side and positioning the folded edge so it just covers the original stitch line on the neck of the bodice. Adding few pins and sewing from the right side of the bodice, the folded edge on place to the neckline of the dress. Now I'm placing the back with front hem piece right side up and putting the front piece on top of it, right sides together. I'm aligning the front neckline with the notches on the back neckline. So this is my indication so that they are together the right way. And then I'm adding a few pins, and then I'm flipping the front hem of the back and front hem piece so that I can align it together with the front piece waist and underarm seams. So I'm pinning these also together now so that I can sew this underarm front waist seam in one go. And when sewing, you have to be just a little bit careful at the underarm point, kind of angle the stitch line slightly outwards to allow ease and freedom of movements. And then I'm also sewing the upper shoulder line as I'm on it. So normally you would just add interfacing here, but as I don't have anything else but the lock stitch machine, so I'm hacking this part a bit. So I'm putting here a piece of fabric and marking similarly like 1 centimeter from the center front the places where I want to have the holes for the waist ties, and then I'm drawing a line here and stitching around these lines that I've created. And then I'm gonna cut following the line and snip into the corners and turn the fabric to the wrong side of the bodice. And after that, after I pressed everything and everything is nice and neat from the outside, I'm gonna edge stitch the whole line still to secure it, and trim a little bit of the fabric away so that it's nicely hidden behind the casing after it's finished, also in the inside of the dress. So this is my way of kind of hacking the buttonholes, which I cannot do with my machines here, and I'm too lazy to make them by hand. So now you should turn the bodice wrong side out, and this here is the upper casing bias piece, and on this edge that will be aligned to the neckline back opening, you should fold the raw edge twice, 1.75 centimeters, and top stitch close to the fold. And now you can align this folded edge to the neckline opening at the back and position the short raw end of the bias 2.5 centimeters up from the sleeve hem where you have the notch there. And you're aligning the bias right side facing with the edge of the front shoulder seam allowance all the way. So add a few pins, and then you can take the lower casing bias piece and place it right sides together with the back underarm seam allowance. be careful there that you have it right way around, and continue along the front waist on the hem side of the seam allowance. So not on the front piece like the neckline side, but on the hem side. And position each end again like 2.5 centimeters up from the sleeve hem, and then you can sew both of the casing bias pieces to the bodice seam allowances using 1 centimeter seam allowance. So basically you are following the waist seam stitching and the shoulder stitching lines to sew them in place. And take care again at the underarm point when you're sewing that one. Then you can use an iron to press the remaining raw edge under by approximately 1 centimeter to create the finished casing that is just over 1 centimeter wide. Press all bias strips and seam allowances upwards and pin the upper bias into the back of the body and the lower bias into the front waist and front underarm of the sleeves, securing them in place. And edge stitch these folds then in place to have the casing completely finished. Now you can turn the bodice right side up. Thread one of the tie through the buttonhole at the center front waist, pulling it through so the ends extend approximately 1.5 centimeters beyond the edge of the sleeve hem. Thread one tie through each center back neck casing and finish the same way. Turn the sleeve hems to the wrong side twice by 2.5 centimeters, enclosing the ties with the hem. Pin in place and edge stitch close to the fold line. Alright, these are the last steps. So take the back hem facing piece and fold and press the curved edge to the wrong side by roughly 1 centimeter, a little bit less. And with the right sides together, align the straight edge of the facing to the center back and match the center back notches. And sew the facing to the bodice hem using 2.5 centimeter seam allowance. Press the whole hem of the bodice to the wrong side by 2.5 centimeters. This means that the curved edge of the facing will extend beyond the bodice hem, wrong side up. And then after that, fold the facing towards the bodice, turning the hem up once more by 2.5 centimeters. Press carefully and add a few pins and edge stitch the whole hem of the bodice close to the fold, following the curved edge of the facing at the back hem. Alright, so now you can secure the ends of each tie with the knot and trim any excess if there is something like that, and creating the desired number of gathers by pulling the ties, and then tie them into bows at the center of the front waist and the center of the back neckline. And your crest is done. My CREST dress is now ready to travel with me to the TAUKO Magazine Issue No19 photoshoot in Hanko. This issue is going to be all about the Nordic Summer magic. I hope you have been enjoying watching the CREST tutorial and making one of your own dresses. Thank you so much for watching.